Thanks for waiting, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this Arches webinar featuring a demonstration of the Greater London Historic Environment Record, or GLHER Online. My name is Annabel Enriquez, and I'm an Arches project team member at the Getty Conservation Institute and today's moderator. Presenting is Stuart Cakebread, the manager of the Greater London Historic Environment Record at Historic England. And during the Q&A session, we will be joined by his Historic England colleagues, Andy Jones and Philip Carlisle. Some housekeeping notes. If you have a question at any point, feel free to enter your question into the Zoom Q&A interface. The chat function is disabled, so please do use the Q&A interface for your questions. If someone has asked a question that you also want to know the answer to, you can upvote a question and we'll prioritize those. This webinar offers live captioning, which you can enable by pushing the live transcript button on the bottom menu. And the webinar is currently being recorded, and we will make the recording available within a week. And you will be notified of this if you follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn, if you are a member of the Arches Community Forum or have subscribed to our mailing list. And so before I hand this over to Stuart, I did want to acknowledge that Historic England has contributed to the Arches project since its inception over a decade ago. Out of this relationship, the Getty Conservation Institute, Historic England, and the City of Lincoln in England decided to collaborate to implement Arches, initially for Lincoln, and then for Greater London, as vehicles for producing what we are calling Arches for HERs. This is essentially an Arches package, customized for use by historic environment records within England, and perhaps as the starting point for those who do similar work elsewhere in the UK and around the world. So thank you to the Lincoln and Historic England teams for working with us to bring much of what you're about to see to fruition. And with that, Stuart, please do unmute yourself and take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Annabel. Let's go. Right. So, hope you can see my PowerPoint here. Is that okay? Right. Thanks very much, Annabel. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. As I say, I'm Stuart Cakebread. It's been my pleasure to be the London HER manager for the last 17 years. Before I start showing some of the features of Arches for HERs, I thought I'd give you a brief overview of historic environment records and the project for those who don't know much about HERs or our project. So what is an HER? An HER, a historic environment record, well, they've been around for over 50 years now. Used to be called Sites and Monuments Records. Historic environment records provide detailed information about the historic environment of a given area for a range of different uses and users. There might be planning, land management work, or research. And basically, they're a record of human interaction with our surroundings from earliest times right up to now. We pull in information from a wide range of sources, and effectively we're a signpost to primary sources of information. We use a range of standards and guidelines and word lists which have evolved over time to ensure data integrity and consistency of recording. Now, most HERs are managed by local government authorities, county councils, district councils, unitaries, who have responsibilities within the planning system. And as a result, they're usually housed within planning teams within their parent organisation. Now, between us, English HERs hold nearly 4 million records on the historic environment in England. Now, as I say, most are managed by local authorities. London is not, and London is in fact unique. It's since 1991, it's been maintained along with most of the archaeological planning advice for London by Historic England, the UK government's advisor on England's historic environment, and who also have a role on overseeing HERs in England. As I say, the HER covers all the London boroughs, all 31 of them, including the cities of Westminster and London, plus a couple of planning authorities. But my archaeological advisory colleagues, they cover all of London save Southwark, who have their own in-house advisor. There's 5 advisors and they share up the whole of the 32 boroughs between them. Now, as I said, HERs have been around for over half a century now. Their origins lay in the map and card index recording system originally used by the Ordnance Survey. Over time, they've become increasingly more computerized, so that today they are held in sophisticated databases and associated mapping systems, GIS. In England and Scotland, most use a system called HBSMR, which has its origins in the late 1990s and was set up on behalf of Historic England, then English Heritage, and ArcGIS, the Association of Local Government Archaeological Officers. But there's also HEROS, which is another open source heritage system, which is used by the Welsh HERs. There's Arches for HERs, of course. There's also a number who use their own in-house bespoke systems. Now, why Arches for HERs? Well, the main things which attracted us to Arches was that being open source, there was no license fees or restrictions on the number of users. For a number of years now, the UK government has advocated the use of open source software. Its use is considered good practice by the government. For example, QGIS or Quantum GIS is now used by a growing number of local authorities and HERs around the country. So Arches neatly ties in with this guidance. It's also web-based, so I'm not restricted to using it on my HE systems, laptops alone. Also, it's customizable. As a local administrator, I can make changes to the system which I was not previously able to do, or which took time due to our internal IT processes. Now, I'm obviously not talking about major alterations to the data structure of Arches for HERs. That would cause data compatibility, integrity issues, but I have the ability to set a user up in 5 minutes to start using Arches now, rather than a week or 4 weeks with our internal IT systems as used to be. I have control not only over the resource models or record groups users have access to, but the data within the records, what mappings they can see, and whether they can edit or download data. This means that not only do GLHER, that's the archaeological advisors, and the HER and our office support teams have access to at the HER, that's about 14 people, but I'm now setting up all the London development management teams who mainly deal with the built heritage with user accounts. Previously, they had no access to our system, and that did lead to a few unfortunate planning situations. So that's another 23 users I'll be adding. Also, we no longer have to be so careful about managing our licenses with how many volunteers we have, or when they come into the office, or when we get HER visitors coming in, or how many licenses we need when we have heritage contractors working for us. Plus, for the first time, external users can view the HER being updated in real time. For example, our commercial users can check data and begin to assess projects before contacting us for data. And hopefully this will mean that we'll not get asked for unrealistic search areas, such as people asking for a kilometre radius search of the City of London, then being horrified when we start to try and charge them thousands of pounds because of thousands of records they want, rather than asking for a 150 metre radius, which only comes up with like a 20 or 30. As I said, not only can I control what access they have to the data and the mapping and what type of records they can see, which is useful, but our external archaeological advisor in Southwark now has access to the system. He can view it rather than us having to package up the data periodically and send it to him, which takes time. But also I can give access to the London Borough Conservation Officers who deal with built planning cases. But it's not just access I can give to them, to these external users. With the Arches users account, hopefully we can get in the future them to actually supply information to us directly, particularly local listings, local buildings of local importance, if they're doing upgrades or new surveys. And that'll be fed directly into the HER. So reducing the amount of time data has to be added or migrated by ourselves. Also, the projects we set up with external contractors, they'll be able to directly add the results straight into the HER. So there's no need for them to have to come into the office, which adds to traveling costs, adds to the project costs, or for us having to do this. Obviously, we still need to monitor their work, and that's where the provisional editor user setup is great, because they can add that data straight away, but it's not visible to outside people, and we can sanction that and improve it as we go along. Possibly even in the future, when we maybe even try and get our contractors to start adding activity and source records as well. Currently, we have 65 users set up with active accounts with 3 different levels of access to Arches. 20 of those are external users testing our system. We could never have afforded this level of interactive access before. Also, we have 5 volunteers at the moment. Once we launch next year, we plan to increase our engagement with the London universities and local heritage groups. If we can double the number of current volunteers, this would potentially be the equivalent of gaining an additional HER officer, something that would be great because we have restrictions on the number of staff we can have at Historic England. But in financial terms, with office and staff overheads, this would be the equivalent of £50,000 a year of additional support we would get. So by using Arches for HER, not only can we show that alignment with the government's policy on open source, but also demonstrate to the government and our Lords and Masters public value for money as well. Now, the system is intuitive, easy to use. That's what the website says. And we've had lots of public positive feedback from internal users migrating to the system on how easy to pick up the system and use it. But that's also been backed up by our external users new to the system. Some of them viewed a presentation I gave at the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists London branch meeting a while back, and there was a lot of enthusiasm for using the system. We also liked the ethos that users can share the benefits of their work. The work that HE is doing for Arches for HER gets loaded up onto our GitHub website and is accessible for any others to use, and vice versa. And I'll touch on that again later. Now, we've been working on this project for a while now. As Annabel said, our colleagues in Lincoln launched Arcade. This was the first English HER to use Arches, and this was a test case to see the potential of Arches, as the Lincoln system is a much smaller and simpler data set than the London record. Since then, we've basically taken Arches apart and put it back together. We've talked a lot in the team and with our developers, but also with others outside of HE, Historic England, with an interest in historic environment records about how to build Arches for HER and what to include in it. We've now been using our version of Arches for HER for over a year now, about 16 months, and Lincoln began using theirs earlier this year. We have another HER in the process of migrating from our old system to Arches, and another one looking at migrating as well. Internally, my IMT colleagues, Andy Jones's team and others, not only have they been working on Arches for HER for London, but they've been working on Arches internally. We have Warden, which is recording our land-based national heritage data, but also maritime archaeology, Mariner, which they're currently working on now. So Arches for HER, unfortunately, I don't have time to show all the features we've been working on, but if there are any in the audience who want to find out more about Arches for HERs, or are interested in HERs or the work of HERs, we will be giving a presentation at the Winter HER Forum meeting in York on the 12th of December. Alternatively, we'd be very happy to give demonstrations and discuss the project with people or organisations. We've already given demonstrations to a number of HERs now, as well as UK national historic environment bodies, and including one natural environment body, which was quite exciting. So I'm going to just pick three things that we've been working on, which I hope will be of interest generally to Arches users. Now, one of the things we first did was review the resource models in Arches. Those familiar with HER data will recognise the main data groups we have added to Arches for HERs, but talking to colleagues, we decided to further expand these to give us the potential to add more information relevant to particular records such as maritime vessels and aircraft, for example. For now, I'm going to concentrate on two resource models, application areas and consultations. Now, these relate to heritage planning casework, which my archaeological advisors carry out, but these and the workflows I'm going to show, I think, could also be used for land management, probably project management, and maybe financial case management as well. So after much discussion with our advisors, it was decided to, rather than add all the data related to their casework into a consultation record as we've done before, to split the information into two parts. Now, there's two halves. The application area, now this covers information on the site, where the site is located, associated heritage, any associated heritage designations which might have implications for any planning cases or development that's taking place on the site. And then the consultation, the cons, which covers information about what is being done to the site, the planning application, what condition our advisors placed on it, and the management of the casework officer's case. The advisors felt this was a better way to manage particularly complex cases. Most of the cases we'll have will be one area, one site, and one case, but in London, there are often very large infrastructure projects such as Crossrail 2, you may have heard of. Also a big one we had in the Battersea Channel, multiple residential developments. There's the development of the former Battersea Power Station. Older listeners may have recognised that from the Pink Floyd album. And also the new US Embassy, with multiple planning applications happening over a long period of time. So we asked our developers to create workflows which would help users add information to these two systems, but also try and help them ensure greater accuracy and to pick the workflows up as quickly as possible. And this is what they came up with. So just let that start. So you can see up the top here, we have two new tabs, active and new. Now, I'll talk about active in a bit, but that's for tracking live casework. New, this is where our new workflows sit for application areas and consultations. And these will be used by our business support record officers to initially create application areas and initial consultation records, which will then be picked up by our archaeological advisors. Now, as you can see, we've got 5 workflows here, 2 related to the resource models on the left, the 3 on the right. These are for the casework officers, the archaeological advisors, and they will use them as part of their management of their casework. As I say, the application area and initial consultation record will be created by our business support team, who very often don't have a lot of archaeological experience. So, as you can see here, there's various tabs that you need to work through. Now, as I said before, we wanted to try and ensure accuracy as much as possible. So one of the things I can do as a local administrator is I can go to the cards which feed into this workflow, and I can set the application area text box so that users have to add something before they can move on. They have to add a name. And this is particularly useful because we've had problems in the past with people not adding names or boroughs or dates for casework, which can have quite a dramatic effect with or implications for caseworks and completing them in due time. Now, next we can add some description to our record here. As I say, this is all about recording the site. The next thing on here is, once I've added the description, I can spatially represent the site. Now, as you know, Arches uses longitude and latitude as part of its mapping system. we in the UK prefer to use our own system, the British National Grid, Eastings and Northings. So what we're trying to do is ensure as much local coordinate system compatibility as possible. Although I have to say that we've done, I think, 700 data requests so far in 16 months, and I think only one person has queried us supplying the data in longitude and latitude. So I'm looking for my site. It's the old Halls depot in Causden off Marpit Lane. Now I'm just going to add a polygon here. Obviously I can drag and drop GeoJSON or KML file, but I'm going to do it old school way because we like to keep it simple. I don't need to worry too much about the accuracy here because we just want a representation. I've given up trying to get our archaeological advisors to map anything accurately or too accurately. Now, I can add information about the shape, but as I say, one of the things we've got here is, as I say, we use BNG. So if I go to the edit coordinates, you can see I can change the coordinates using the Eastings and Northings, the British National Grid. We can do it in longitude and latitude, but as I say, we get most of our information using our local coordinate system. And this is just one of the things that we've done to try and add some local flavor to the record. Now I'm happy with that. I'm going to save that. I'm going to move on to associated heritage on the site. Now I can add this by searching for sites and putting them in. However, what we'd like to do in future is take that spatial mapping that we've just done and get Arches to go away and pick the monuments or artifacts or areas that are associated with that and pull it up in a drop list, which I can then pick from. This has been done on another non-heritage related Arches project. So Famous Last Works shouldn't be too much of a stretch for future versions of Arches. As you can see, there's a couple of sites here that I know are related to this site. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to move on to add on the description. Once I've given a bit of an area description, the last thing that I'll do is add information about associated designations. This is heritage designations, which will have an impact on the proposed work that our developer wants to take place on this site. Very often this will be national designations such as listed buildings or scheduled monuments, but also more local designations such as conservation areas. So if we're doing building works, that has an impact on what work can be done for the building. In this case, I know that it's in one of our archaeological priority areas, Croydon Down. So I'm just going to add that here because, as I say, we want to add as much information as we can in one place. And this is designed to help the archaeological advisor make their decision on what needs to take place on this site. I know it's a tier 2, so it is of significance. So when the advisor comes to see this, he can look at the type of work that's been proposed when we come to do the consultation. And we know that there's a medium risk to the heritage. So they will factor that in when they come to their decision-making process. I can add the link to the APA record there, or if there's any digital files, site photos, for examples, I can add that. And I can keep adding more and more designations if they're relevant. Finally, we can then review the information that we've added just to check it's okay. Obviously, you can see down the bottom here, we can go back to previous steps, or we can actually go into the record and look at it. I look at that and yeah, that all seems to be okay there. No spelling mistakes, so that's good for me. And we can save that and we can move on to our next thing. Now, consultation. Though we created our application area, we need to link that to a consultation. Now, there's two ways we can do this. We can do this spatially by using the application area layer here and linking spatially. Alternatively, we can add the name and link it that way. And that's important because we do need that functionality for accessibility reasons in the Greater London Archaeological Advisory Service. So here I'm just adding the name, so Marpit Lane, that's fine. I'm just going to type in the name, or I could add the postcode just to check I've got the right record. Let's go there. Let's go past the memorial grounds. Yeah, there's halls near the railway. Yeah, that's fine. I'll say the polygon looks a bit ropey. It looks better when I add it to the OS map, but yeah, that's fine. I'm happy with that. I can add some more information about the location description if I want to, but I think I'm happy with that. So I'm going to save and close that and move on to the next tab. Now, as I said, consultation dates, really important. We have 21 days to respond to a planning application. So this is why it's vital that this information has to be added. I spent many hours previously every month searching for log dates or missing log dates, to then have to send emails to advisors each month saying, please can you fill this in, because otherwise it's not going to get factored into our stats. I no longer have to do that. So that's brilliant. Next, we're going to be adding information about the consultation type. And I say, this is all information that for us is being added by our business support team. The archaeological advisor, the casework officer, doesn't need to do this yet. But it is important because this is all going to be part of the consultation, but will also feed into the condition letter that we're going to be sending back to the borough who've got in contact with us about this planning application. Now, next, reference numbers. All the planning applications have planning references, which we need to add. Now, another little feature I can add as a local administrator, you can see the reference type there automatically comes up with planning reference. That's because most of the references we add are planning references. So to save a bit of time, I can set that in the card to show, and that saves a little bit of time for people when they're adding the information. And our business support officers are always very keen to save as much time as they can when they're adding information. So it's a Croydon record. I can also add further references. We have our own internal reference system. So I'll change that to system reference for glass, but you can add further references as the casework continues. There might be a project number from the archaeological contractors that you want to add there as well. Next, once I've done that, I want to add what the proposal is. Now, I can either type this in as I'm doing here, or depending on how we get the information from the London Borough, we can just cut and paste that in here. And then after that, we'll add the contact details. Now, these are important because they show who's doing the work, who's, as I say, the casework that is, who we're responding to, who the developer, the owner might be, because this is where our letter is going to go to our correspondence saying, this is the our decision on the site. It might be that no further work's required, or it might be that we decide that further work is required. So I'm just putting that in here now. And again, it's really important we record as much information as we can on the record. Now, I'm going to add the planning officer here. So this is old Charlie from Croydon. He sent us a plan application for our consideration. He's the person we're going to be sending the letter back to. So we need to know who to send our letter to. And he's Croydon, most important borough in London. We're setting him as the contact officer. I'm putting the casework officer myself because that's who the letter is going to come from. And then I can add agent, owner, or applicant if required. Now, once I'm happy with that, I'll save and close that. And as before with the application area, I can just review that information, make sure it's okay. And once I'm happy with that, I'll go away and save that, and that's saved that record. Now, I'll just show you the branches in the consultation record. Now, obviously, what we've done there isn't the full record. That's enough for the advisor to get cracking and starting on their work. What they then need to do using the information they've got from the borough, and the application area is make an assessment of the significance of the site based on heritage on the site and heritage designations impacting on the site, and then give their advice on what actions. Say it may be no further works required, or it might be no, we need a program of trial trenching to evaluate the site. Once they've done that, they can then create their correspondence record. This is the letter that gets sent out. So what we do is we link the consultation here, as you can see. We have a number of set template letters based on conditions. The advisor picks that, hits the OK button, and then Arches generates a letter. And here I've had to blank out some of the information because this is a live record, but you can see it's been pulling information from the consultation record. But not only has it produced a letter which can be then sent on to the borough, it automatically saves that to the consultation record. Now, one of the things we're very keen on is having as much information as we can within that consultation record. In the past, information gets stored by the individual advisor in emails, might be brief notes in the consultation, and that makes it very difficult if somebody's off sick and somebody has to step in or take over a new borough, or even come back to a casework afterwards. So we're trying to get as much information as we can related to the record, and the correspondence gets added to our communication section of the consultation record. Now we can add other communications here, emails, faxes, telephone calls. Let's have an example here, location of trenches. We've agreed a program of trial trenching. The archaeological team on the site has come back and said, the land's contaminated, we can't put the trenches where you said. We want to add them in new places, and we sent you a map of where they are. I can record my conversation I've had with them. Yeah, that's okay. I'm happy with that. I can then set any follow-up actions that might be right. I'm going to come out next week and have a look at these trenches, and I can upload the map they sent of the revised trench locations. And again, once I'm happy, save that, and that gets added to the consultation record. So last one, site visits. I can go to the site, I can have the meeting, I upload my consultation again, I can put information about the visits, describe the location, yeah, heavily contaminated. I can then add information about who was on the site, what observations are made, yeah, those trenches in the right locations, recommendations, yeah, maybe one or two need to be extended. I'll come back again in another week and check on them, and also add site photographs as well. And here's a real example that my colleague Sandy created. As you can see, we've got information about the site, the description, who attended, observations, what the recommendations, and photographs on the site. And this is really important because this means that all the information is in one place. So when our advisors go on site, we can have certain clients who are rather tricky. Let's leave it as that. But now advisors can go on site and say, no, here you go. They can get out their laptop or their tablet or phone and say, no, this is what was agreed. Black and white, this is what we've got, and these are the photographs proving it. So that's a real bonus for our advisors. Lastly, active, this is where we can keep track of our live cases. It works on the traffic light system. Green, you've got loads of time to look at your case. Yellow or amber, you've got a week to make a decision. Red, it's overdue. And the advisors can keep track of this themselves. They can do it by borough or type of work. My boss can keep track of this. And this actually saves me, as I said before, having to contact all the individual advisors, do some searches on this and say, please, can you update your records? The other thing that we've done is we have monthly stats. In the past, it's taken me 3-4 hours every month, running queries, checking to make sure that people have filled in things properly, filling them in, doing them again. Now we've got it linked to Power BI. I can do it in 5 minutes. All the information I require is at my fingertips. I can send people this or just add it to a spreadsheet. And in future, we're looking at seeing if we can add HER record creation to this, but we'd also like to think about whether we can add it for the HER audit or the Historic England annual survey. So that's the workflow process that I wanted to talk about. Another thing that we're working on, which probably relevant hopefully for other people, is we have new regulations in the UK over the last few years about public sector organisations having a legal duty to make websites and apps meet accessibility requirements. I imagine that is something that other people outside England or the UK also need to consider. In 2019, HE commissioned a report to look at Arches, and the report that came back on Arches, we've used that working with Farron on geographics closely to make Arches for HER as accessible as possible. Some of the things that we've done, enabling zooming up to 300% without text spilling off the screen. It works fine with a mobile phone, as you can see. I have actually gone outside and used it myself. Allowing users to navigate most of the website using just keyboards. You can see highlights over tabs here. Also allowing users to listen to most of the website using a screen reader, including JAWS or NVDA or VoiceOver. And we've just started to look at Dragon, not just looking at text to voice, but voice to text, because that's something we need in GLHER as well. Now, all of this is being or will be loaded onto the Historic England GitHub site for downloading. Once it goes into Arches for HERs, it will go into core Arches as well. I think 7.5 we're aiming at. But this won't be the end of the accessibility work that we're doing. We're refining our guidance and terms that goes on to Arches for HERs as well. And we're going to try and continue to make Arches as accessible as possible. Now, I'm running out of time, so I won't do a live demo of this. I'll just do some screenshots. But as I said, Arches is great. It's I can get users set up very quickly and creating spatial features with very little training in just a few minutes. However, as an HER, we do require sometimes to create more detailed mapping, spatial mapping, and also there's layers that we may not necessarily want to have onto Arches. So we ask our developers to come up with a link between Arches and GIS. We're an Esri organisation, so that's what we asked for, and that's what we got. So the Arches Esri link, or Arches Esri add-on, connects Arches to ArcGIS Pro, allowing direct access either way for creating spatial data. Currently, it's up to version 2.9. I should say that this doesn't come out of the box. It does need some configuration to get the mapping in and working. And this is something that, if you're interested in, I'm sure my colleague Andy Jones can tell you more about. We've had a lot of interest in this, and also particularly in a QGIS version of this. I'd love to see a QGIS version of this. So, as you can see, we have a new tab up here called Arches Projects. If I click on that, that brings up another little window for Arches connection and about editing resources or creating new resources, and a few general tabs that I can use. So what I do is I link to my server, add my user details, make sure I don't show anybody online my password, as I've done before, and then connect to the Arches server. Hopefully, in future versions, we'll look at seeing if we can get rid of that and have it so that once you've logged into Arches, it does this automatically. Now, using my working layer, I create my spatial feature or features. I select that. Then I decide what resource model type I want to. In this case, I'm going to create a monument. I then want to load that geometry up into Arches. Arches will say, do you want to do this? And I'll say yes. So Arches will go away. It will create a new blank Arches record, and it will populate the spatial record into that. When it's done, it will give me the hexadecimal number here. And then if I want to add further information to that record in Arches, I can click on the resource editor, and it will pull up the record into the Chrome pane here into Pro. Now I can add the information here if I want to, or I can pull that out, put it into another browser window, because we use two screens. But given our old GIS system, we used ArcMap, we don't see a lot of, in fact, it is slightly quicker than our old GIS system. That's nothing to do with our old HER system. That's entirely, I think, a Citrix thing, an ArcMap, which used to take a while. So this is slightly quicker. I think I'll start to slowly lose my voice. So you'll be very pleased to hear that I'm going to stop talking now. I could talk and talk and talk. But obviously, if you'd like to find out more about this, please give me, Phil, or Andy a shout, and I'll hand back to you, Annabel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. That was a great presentation. I think you really covered a lot of the some of the great features of GLHER Online and Arches for HERs. So I'm going to ask Andy and Phil to unmute themselves and to join us for the Q&A. And I'm going to ask if there, before we launch into the questions, if there's anything that you all would like to add.
I think Stuart did a very good job with demoing that, so well done.
Checks in the post
through a lot of it. Yeah, well done, well done. Yeah, I mean, to say it has, we have been doing a lot of work on it. Certainly areas around the accessibility and improving those areas and working on the ArcGIS ProLink. Yeah, there's been a lot of work. Obviously, we're still not there on all of it, as Stuart was saying. We're continuing to improve it and work on that, and hopefully for the benefit of everyone else who's going to use it in the future.
Yeah, I'd just like to second what Andy said about Stu doing a grand job. Well done, Stu.
Pints in the post.
Just a half.
Okay, great. So we already have some questions, and there's been some upvoting, and so I'll just go launch into them. So the first question is from Jonathan Robinson, and he asks, what would be required to initiate a QGIS server, GeoServer version? Has this been done for other implementations of Arches?
I don't know if guys you want to chip in. As far as I'm aware, it hasn't been. It's something that we've started to talk about. I know that Farallon are very interested in this. I would be. I love QGIS. I think it's great, and it's open source. So again, goes in with the Arches and government ethos and open source software. We will hopefully start discussing this with the Arches UK user group and see if we can get some ideas there as well. Phil, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, I was talking to Phil Weir from Flax and Teal about this in Belfast 2 weeks ago now, and yeah, he's started looking at how to get this going. So cool. Phil's quite keen on using QGIS because it fits with Flax and Teal's open source ethos. So yeah, hopefully he'll be able to talk about that at the user group.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah, and I think this would be a good time to mention that this is one of the beauties, of Arches being open source software. Flax and Teal is an Arches service provider that is not currently working with Historic England. They're working on their own, and this is something as part of the Arches community, any developer, any organization can initiate development to add functionality to the Arches platform. So. Okay,
yeah, I think Flax and Teal are working with Northern Ireland Heritage Service. Yeah. They're looking at transferring their sites and monuments record to Arches.
That's right. Okay. All right, so we answered that. All right, next question. And again, if there's a question that is that has been entered into the Q&A panel that you would like to upvote, please do that so that I know what questions I should prioritize. See. Are there mechanisms to do bulk data uploads GLHER/Arches for HERs, e.g. from community groups or external projects?
I think that's coming. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, yes. I mean, yeah. There's been a lot of work, I know, behind the scenes in terms of a bulk uploader of data. So there is a mechanism that's being built in to allow people to customize or create custom flows of delivering data into the system. I think I'm not sure what the current status of it is, whether it's due to come out. I know it is in some of the current versions. You can enable it and start using it, but I know certainly there is a mechanism in there. I think there is an element of kind of developer or certainly some kind of technical skills required for it. I think it does come out of the box with some kind of default modes, but we're certainly going to be looking at that for kind of the future for Arches for HER and also for Mariner, just in ways we can use it to kind of manage data coming in and out of the system.
Thank you, Andy. And just as a note, there are multiple, as Andy alluded to, multiple mechanisms to do bulk data uploads into Arches. At this point, initially we had CSV upload, and now we have different kinds of CSV uploads, and we had shapefile upload and also different kinds of uploads. Now we have the ability to upload data directly into the Arches underlying database, the Postgres database. So there are many ways to do this. All right, next question. What are the future hopes and plans for Arches, bearing in mind that the majority of HERs currently use other HER software, such as HBSMR?
Well, basically, we're trying to provide another option. You know, we don't want to dominate the whole scene. We're just providing people with another option, which, given the way that technology has gone, I think potentially would be a benefit to many HERs. I mean, it may not be all HERs. Some of them, for various reasons, perfectly good reasons, quite happy with their own system, whatever that system may be. But we would certainly like, well, we have got other HERs moving on to the system. And I think, you know, it's just healthy competition, really. Yeah, there are future things that we'd like to bring to Arches, but I won't say too much more about that at the moment. I think I'll save some of that perhaps for the HER forum meeting. But yeah, watch this space, really. I don't know, Phil, Andy, if you've got anything you want to add to that.
The only thing I would sort of say is the flexibility and the semantic nature of the graph database is, you know, a future-proof benefit, really. That's why we're sort of using it more internally now. So to replace the old Amy database, which was a burning platform, so that's why we had to quickly move over and create Warden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, and just to add to that, I think there was also a question about why wasn't this tried with Warden, and I believe that question has been answered, so it is being used for Warden. So, all right, but I will add regarding just generally regarding the Arches platform in regards to the future hopes and plans for Arches, we are at the Arches project, we are making provisions for the long-term governance of the open source community so that there is some longevity, not just to the data that you hold in Arches that you all manage, but to the software itself and the software community. So that's something that is currently being planned for. Also,
Annabel, just say that Historic England, we're also looking at how we can support Arches for HERs going forward. It's very early days yet, and there's been no decisions made yet. But yeah, that's something that how we would see how we can do that. And I believe that HE is also involved with the governance board as well.
Mm-hmm. That's right, they are. Okay, great. So next question regarding Power BI. Okay, how easy is it to use and implement Power BI with Arches? And could you please show where you access Power BI reports from Arches?
Those are very good questions, and I'm glad somebody asked those. I have to say, one of our developers has done that for us. It's one of those things that it's on my PDR to learn how to do that. So once I've learned how to do it, I'll tell you how to do it. I don't think it should be too difficult. Andy can shoot me down for what I've just said.
Yeah. No, we've just built we've built it is a relatively simple Power BI dashboard, just to kind of cover a few of those sort of metrics we are using. It is directly connecting to the database on it, so it is separate. It's not part of Arches, but we use the edit log table, which captures the audit of all the work that's happening, and that allows us and gives us the information that we need to generate those statistics. So I guess if you're a user of Power BI and you're able to connect into that edit log table, then you should be able to generate those. I think there are a couple of additional ones that we have, so some enhancements that we've done where we are querying some of the information out of Elasticsearch as well. So that is a slightly more advanced part of it. I think, to do with some of the targets, the 21-day targets, but the rest of it is coming out of the audit log.
Yeah, ask me in a couple of months' time again.
Great. All right, next question. So this is from Jonathan Robinson. What sort of costs are likely to be associated with implementation? For example, do Lincolnshire have some analysis as a smaller HER? For a non-HBF SMR HER, what sort of technical staff would be required?
I mean, cost-wise, I mean, Andy can do the more technical side. That's a very good question. It's something that we've been desperately trying to calculate ourselves as part of the project, because we knew that this is something that is very pertinent to people wanting to move to Arches. Unfortunately, the way that we developed the system by breaking it and putting it back together, it's been very difficult for ourselves to do that. And I would say probably the way that the Lincoln system went together, again, not necessarily going to give you a true reflection of the cost, although they were using a bespoke system. We are, with the HER that's moving to Arches at the moment, we are in contact with them. We are giving them a bit of advice, and we are looking at trying to keep a record of what they've done and their costs. So once they go live, we should be able to give a better indication of what the costs should be. I do think, though, that from what my experience so far of the system is, that even if there are perhaps costs to begin with, as I say, with the ability to engage with many more volunteers than we could do in the past, there's long-term cost benefits which outweigh any perhaps initial costs to begin with.
Andy, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
So I think just looking at the kind of the technical staff required for setting up, there is an element of sort of technical skill that you'd need to have, be that you're an internal team that you might already have, or maybe getting a provider to come in and help. I think it's safe to say there's a need for developer support, certainly at the moment, to kind of get it stood up and do some of the customizations that you want. Some of the report templates and some of the workflows need a little bit of customizing. So there is an element of additional kind of technical skills you may need to support you standing that up. Obviously, we're fortunate to have an in-house team that has been able to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll just add generally for Arches and Arches for HERs and any other Arches implementation, the kinds of costs that are associated have to do with implementing your Arches system on a server, and then having the technical, as Andy mentioned, having the technical expertise to implement Arches. And most of the time, those costs are at the beginning of an implementation as you are setting it up. Fortunately, in this case, for anyone who is in any organization that is an HER in England, a lot of this work has been done for you by Lincoln and Historic England. So not a lot of not a lot of customization will be as required, but for others, if you do have customization, that's something that you should consider resourcing. And if you do need technical expertise and do not have that in-house, on our website, we have a list of ArcGIS service providers. We had just mentioned Flax and Teal. They're a UK-based one and others. So if you go check out the listing on our website, you can see what other service providers there are. Okay, next question. Where are other instances hosted, on premises or cloud-based? So Andy or Stu?
Yeah, so our systems are hosted in Azure at the moment. So it's kind of a fairly standard installation. I mean, we're slightly unusual in that we run ours on top of Windows VMs, and I know a lot of people use Linux VMs for that. We're also planning in the future to try and implement that in more of a cloud platform kind of way without going into too much detail on it. So we're trying to slowly evolve that, but we host it in Azure. Yeah, so I think, I don't know if there's anything else to kind of cover there.
Okay, thank you. Next question, does Arches for HERs or GLHER support publication to the Heritage Gateway at present?
Yes, so so Arches out of the box doesn't, but we have an additional component that does publish information from both Warden and Keystone onto the Heritage Gateway, so that is there. We haven't made that available at the moment. I think because we're still working out what the long-term goal is, and I think when we move forward, it may well be that we do look to make that available, but that is built in at the moment using .NET rather than the standard Arches framework. So we may look to change it so that we support something that's a little bit more integrated into Arches in the long term. But I know there's work happening around the Heritage Gateway and the future of the gateway, so we obviously want to see how that progresses as well before we make a decision.
All right, next question. What is the long-term stability of the software behind Arches? Most website platforms release updates every few years, and some require almost complete rewrites of the platform. What's the long-term maintenance plan, I guess? And I can answer this as a member of the core Arches team at the GCI. I mentioned our governance initiative, in which is basically planning for the long-term stability of the software, of the open source software in the community. And again, that is one of the beauties of having open source software, is that it's not about making unilateral decisions about the software and whether or not it's profitable or not. It's really community focused and governed governance of the software. And currently with the Arches software, we're making updates definitely more than every few years. We're making them quite a bit, and definitely keeping an eye on making sure that that we're not making any major changes that aren't warranted. So, and that truly benefit the community. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything about that.
I think the Arches is well maintained at the moment, and like you said, the changes that are being made are making sure and ensuring that all the the backend software and the dependencies are current and secure. So that is ongoing, and as you said, any sort of major changes are being done or are done because they are need to be done to maintain security and currentness.
Mm-hmm. All right. Richard Hughes asks, and I know that we are at time, but we can answer a few more questions before we wrap up. Would it be possible to store an HBM model fully within Arches?
I would say at the moment, no, because we don't have a model for it, but we could we could easily build a model for HBM. So yes.
Mm-hmm.
it would be possible. At the moment, as it stands, Arches for HER doesn't have the model, the resource model at present.
Mm-hmm. But to Phil's point, it is very easy to, if there is a data type or and some kind of digital object that you want to store within Arches, that's something that you just, as Phil mentioned, build a model for, and then you can store it. Now, viewing is a whole different animal, but you can fully store most digital file types using Arches as long as you provide for that. Okay, and next question, Rob Gaston. How can folks stay up to date with the latest happenings with Arches for HERs? Are the UK user group meetings open to new attendees interested in following the project? And he says, thanks for a great talk.
Thanks. Yes, we're still in our infancy with the UK Arches user group. We're having them periodically, but yeah, people, if you're interested in that, drop me a line and I can add you to the user list. The dates of our meetings go up on the Arches main website, but also, yeah, just ask me. I'm the chair now for my sins, so yeah, just get in contact. Anybody interested, let me know.
Yeah, and if you're interested in additional information on the UK user group, we always post information about meetings upcoming on our social media and on the Arches community forum. And there's also a web page on our website that has information about that group.
And there's also the US user group as well. They do some really interesting things as well.
That's right. And if you are interested in attending the US user group meeting, that's actually tomorrow at 12 p.m. US Pacific time. And that's open to, it's US based, but it is open to everyone if you're interested in seeing what US users are doing with Arches. Okay, and then comment, not question, from Ben Wallace. Great demo, Stuart. Interested to see how it works on the archaeological planning, advice, and consultation side. Looking forward to seeing the demo at the HER forum later this year. So
thanks,
yeah, that's a nice comment. From Serena Kant. If this report came out in 2019 and influenced the building of GLHER, why wasn't tab and keyboard functionality built into Word? And I believe this is the report on accessibility that Serena is referring to, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
the reason was that Warden had to be built very quickly to get the data out of the Oracle database, because we'd had an issue where an Oracle database had failed and we'd lost all the data. So it had to be quick and dirty to get the data in there. Warden is now in the process of being upgraded, and so the accessibility work that was been developed for GLHER is now being fed into Warden, so that is coming. Yes, it's been a while, but we've had to work on various things, and actually getting accessibility into core Arches has been one of the main drivers for the development of GLHER as it is, and being able to feed those changes into future versions, including Warden and Mariner.
Thank you, Phil. So the last question, and then we'll close after this question, is customizability being tried with other options where there is developer time? And I think that's a very broad question, but I will say this, that they can be. Does anyone else have any comments on that?
Yeah, you go on, Stu.
No. I was just going to say, from a HER point of view, as I said, obviously, the ability to keep upgrading to future versions of Arches for HER, but also to enable information transfer between HERs. It's very important that we are all singing from the same hymn sheet. So I think we need to agree that what goes into, once we get more traction with more HERs, we'll be able to build a group so that we can start building consensus. Obviously, it's very much our view at the moment with input from other people, but we can build a view saying this is how we're taking Arches for HER forward. If you want to deviate from that path, then you do so at your peril.
Yep. Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and close this webinar. Thank you all for attending, and especially through the Q&A. And if you have any questions about additional questions about Arches, you can go to our website. You can see that on the screen, or and if you have specific questions that were not answered here, or questions that you just think of post webinar, feel free to enter those or on the community forum, and someone will answer your question there. Thank you, everyone. And with that, I will close the webinar.